So in this video I'm going to show you how to make a pair of drawstring trousers. You will need a sewing machine, but you don't need an overlocker or any special equipment like pinking shears. I'll be explaining to you how to do fell seams and French seams so that all of your raw edges are hidden within your seam allowance. So for the size 12 trouser pattern, I've used 1.5 meters of linen that's 440 centimetres wide. And because it's plain and it hasn't got a pattern that's running in a certain direction, I've been able to top and tail my trouser legs, and that's allowed me to use relatively a small bit of fabric. Obviously, depending on how big your pattern is, how wide your fabric is, and whether there's a pattern on it is dependent on how much fabric you're going to need. I've given an approximate guide attached to this video, but I've only got to say there's so many sort of variables with fabric that it's only an approximate guide, and you're best just to be on the safe side and get a little bit extra. So the fabric's folded over. So at the top of the screen, that should be the folded side of the fabric, and at the bottom of the screen is where the two selvage edges meet and they should join. Okay. So each pattern piece has a grain line on it. It's like a long line with two little arrows at the end. That's got to run parallel to either the selvage or the fold of your fabric. So I'm just getting my tape measure now. I've pinned one in place there that's 9 centimetres from the fold. Okay, and now what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to rotate the pattern now so that the distance between the other end of that grain line is also 9 centimetres. And what this does is just ensures that the grain of the trousers is just going to run with the grain of the fabric, so it's going to run vertically on your body, which will give your trousers a better hang. So I'm going to pin all around now. So if you'd like to add a little bit of length to your trousers, when you're putting your pattern pieces on, just bear in mind, leave a little bit of space at the bottom. Now I'm just using a ruler. I've just brought those seams down, and I'm adding 3 inches to the bottom of the trousers using a bit of tailor's chalk and a tape measure. And now using my ruler, I'm going to put my new hem line in. Okay. And then we're just going to cut around that instead of the pattern. So when you finish, you should have a back. That's the back. That's one part of the pocket. And that's the second part of the pocket. This is the front that's got the little triangle cut out of the corner. And this is the waistband. Okay, so now because this fabric looks the same on the inside and the outside, it's a good idea to get some tailor's chalk and mark the wrong side of the pattern. So I'm going to do this on all of the pieces. I'm also going to leave the pattern pieces pinned to the pattern, to the fabric that we're not using, and that's going to save you chucking out by mistake, or at least you're going to know what everything is. So just do that, keep the pattern pieces together with the fabric. Okay, so the reason that we do this is because we're making a mirror image of each side of the trousers. Is going to be a mirror image, and it's so easy if you don't know what the right or wrong side of the fabric is to make, say, 2 right legs or 2 wrong legs. So you will notice that if you do this on fabric that's very similar on both sides, it will really help you not make that mistake. Okay. So I'm starting with the front bits of my trousers lying on the table the right way up. See, the crosses are on the bottom. I'm going to start putting the pockets in. So I'm getting the front pocket. That's the one that's got a little angle. And I'm going to put it onto lay it onto the trousers so it matches, and the cross should be pointing up. Okay. And now I'm going to pin that in place, and maybe if you'd like to do this, you could put like a little stitch line, a little line with some chalk or a pencil or something, just to give you a guide. Okay, we're using centimetre seam allowances. Okay, and I'll just put a few pins in that. So 2 pins should be enough. So I've got this on my machine now, and I am, when you're putting your fabric pieces on the machine, just make sure that the bulk of the fabric is always to the left and the seam is to the right. Okay, so I'm just going to sew down that line. Now I'm going to open up the pocket, leaving the seam pointing in the pocket direction, and I'm going to do a little top stitch very close to that seam, okay? And what this does is, because this pocket bit that I'm sewing on now is a lining, when we fold it back, it keeps it back so it doesn't pop forward. So it gives you a nice sharp line for your pocket edge. Okay, so just make sure that seam is pointing in that direction. So we'll just do that again so that you can, so starting on the other side now, you see, just as long as the fabric is to the left. Okay, so we're on that guideline. Take your pins out, don't sew over your pins, you'll break your needle. So keep the seam folding towards the pocket, and then I'm just going to put a row of top stitches, pull that sort of taut, the pocket taut. Could iron that first if you wanted, if it helped. Okay, so now what you see is when you fold that back, that row of stitching is just going to hold the line. So on the back of the table, I've got the trousers with the pocket sewn in, facing upwards, so the right side's up. And now I'm putting the pocket bag in. So you need to just slide that onto, we're going to do French seams, so this is the method to do French seams on the trousers. So just slide them underneath, and you're going to, well, I'm putting a little stitch line in here. Just going to sew very close to the edge, about 5 mils from the edge for your first row of stitching of your French seam. Okay, and I'll put a few pins in. And you're just going to sew on that curved edge. Okay, let's see that again. So, have the trouser facing up, put that underneath it. There's a bit of the pocket. And I'm going to put some pins in this, just to pin it in place. We might put some little guidelines in as well, just to, yeah, there you go. Just 5 mils from the edge, just a tiny little hem. We have to do this in 2 stages, so this is the first stage. We're going to sew around that. Take it to my machine now. So I'm just going to use the edge of my foot. That should give me about 5 mils. I'm going to put the edge of my foot along the edge of the fabric. Okay, this has got to be, as I'm doing it, I'm just making sure that those fabric pieces are together. Okay, because you don't want to be just sewing on one piece of fabric. Now you can lift your foot up. I'm just using my lever here, but if you don't see me using that, it's because on the industrial machine I've got a knee lift. So if you keep lifting your foot to change direction, okay, and do your little back tuck at the end. Okay, do the other one now. Starting at the other side. I usually find you do that when you're working on symmetrical pieces. There we go. I'm just using the edge of my foot as a guide, running it up against the side of the fabric. So So now I'm going to do the second part of creating French seams in your pockets. So I'm turning it totally inside out, the pocket inside out, so that the seam you've just done is on the inside, and I'm using the iron to flatten it out, bringing the seam edge right to the edge and flattening the whole seam out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out a 1 centimetre seam all around that curved edge. And when I sew this in, it should sandwich the seam that I've just done within the stitches. Okay, so let's do that on the other pocket as well. Whatever we do on one, we do on the other. Poking that right out, using my fingers to flatten the seam out and make sure that seam that you've just, the stitch line's right on the edge. Okay, use the iron, bit of steam on the iron. And there you go, mark your 1 centimetre seam in now. And that's ready to take to the machine. So I've got this on the machine. Okay, I haven't pinned this actually, but I'm just going to use my stitch guide. See, I'm going a little bit further in this time. Okay, just follow that line all the way around. Okay, so when we open it up, you shouldn't have any raw edges. Okay, because the first seam allowance is 5mm and this is 10mm. So as long as you've prepared it right, it should be neat. And like that gives you a double strength pocket as well. If you look at your jeans, you'll notice that most pockets are done like this. There we go. So just go on that curved edge. You've got like a little straight bit, but leave that. You're not going to turn any corners. So here's your pocket now. I'm going to just iron it. So fold it back on itself, and that should just all match up. And put a bit of steam on it. It should lie flat. Okay, so as you say, inside it's all neat. There's no raw seams showing. Now what I'm going to do is just put a few pins and sew the edge of the pocket into the top of the trouser there and the side seam of the trouser, just to keep it in place. Okay, just turn it inside, line it with a bit of steam. Fold it back. So you need to make sure that that first line of top stitching we did is on the inside. Okay. And that top stitching we did will give it a nice sharp edge. Okay, and just check for any seams. No seams showing. If there was any seams showing, you just have to do another little row stitching a little bit further in. You don't have to unpick anything. Okay, so I'm going to just do the same here and I'll throw a little row stitching in there so the front's complete. So I'm marking for a false seam. So I've got my trouser the right way up, okay, and I'm marking 1 centimetre down the inner seam using a Sharpie because I just want you to be able to see it, but you could use something that you could see that would wash off. Now I'm putting the back of the trousers so the right sides are together. That means you've got your little cross pointing up, you can see. And I'm matching up the notches. Okay, so don't worry about the top, just make sure the notches are marked. And then I'm lining up the back of the trousers with the little marks that I've just made. Okay. So that's the fit, and I'm putting plenty of pins in really because you want to make sure it's a centimetre the whole way, the distance between the two seams. Okay. Oh, actually, I'm going to turn my pins around because I can tell when I put them to the machine they're going to be in the wrong way. Okay. I'm just rearranging my pins so they're easier to take out. take that to the machine now. So I'm taking to my machine. You can see the way the fabric's lined up against that little red line. Okay, so I'm just going to use the edge of my foot and put a very small seam and sewing about half a centimetre away from the edge of the top piece of fabric. Got my notches marked there together. Okay, just make sure you keep a good lip on this. So now with the iron, I'm going to just fold that lip back, the 1 centimetre lip, so that it should meet the row of stitches that we've just done. Okay, so this is the first part of the false seam process. Now I'm going to open the trousers up, so we should be on the wrong side of the trousers now. I'm going to pull them apart. Okay, and I'm going to start with my arm. I'm going to start pressing that seam back. Okay, so I should have no raw edges showing. I'll turn them round. It's a little bit easier to show you. So I'm folding that back. So we're basically rolling that seam back so all of the raw edges are encased within the false seam. So I'm pulling my trousers apart there so it's going to lie flat. Okay, so if we flip our trousers over, this is the right side now. Just make sure that's flat as well and there's no overlapping of seams. Pull them apart. Okay, and now if we flip that again, we're going to sew along that little lip that we've just created. So I've got them on my machine now. Now, you can see a row of stitches there, those stitches. I'm going to run my foot right along that row of stitches and that should give me a parallel line. Okay, this is the inside of your trousers. Okay, you can see the little marks there on the Okay, so just use the side of your foot and pull your fabric open. Pull your two sides of the trousers open as you go to make sure there's no lies flat on the right side. Okay, so let's flip that over and see what we've got. That's the wrong side and that's the right side. Okay, so for my side seams, I'm going to do a French seam. So that's the same as what we did for the pocket. So as you know, it's done in two parts. So I've got my trousers on the table and as you can see, they're folded the right way around. So the right side of the fabric is on the outside. The crosses should be inside. And I'm just pinning my edges together, matching my notches. And what I'm going to do is take this to the machine now and I'm going to sew a 5mm seam allowance right down the length of the side seam. So here's my 5mm seam that I've just done on the side seam of my trousers. I'm turning my trousers inside out to do the next part of the French seam. I'm going to press my seam so it's right on the very edge. If you've got a sleeve board, it'd be better you could press it flat and then press the seam flat and then do this. But I'm going to do this on the table because I presume most people haven't got a sleeve board. So I'm just going to roll it and make sure that the stitching is right on the edge of that fold. Okay, just rolling it and steaming it. Okay. So I'm just doing the second row of stitches now for my French seam on the outside seams of the leg. Okay, just going over the pocket now. If you just look inside now, you can see that there's our first row of stitches. Okay, and we're just going to sew over that now, and that just increases all of the raw edges within that seam. So I'm just going to use this sleeve board to press my seams flat. You can see that the side seam of the trousers is all encased in the French seam. I'm folding that seam so it folds back on itself, so there's not too much thickness underneath the pocket. Okay. And the reason that we didn't do a false seam on the side seam is because to actually do the second process of the false seam, you have to you need the fabric to be pretty flat. You could do it, but you'd have to sew inside a tube, which is quite difficult. So I'm just using the snippers to take any of the little straggly bits of thread. Okay, so there's one leg of my trousers. So you've got all of your, you can see all the French seams of the pocket and of the side seam. And it should be lying flat. So I've got our two legs here, and now the next thing we're going to do is do our centre seam. Okay, so we're going to do a French seam on this as well. So what I'm doing is turning one of the legs inside out, and this leg is the right way down on the right way round on the table. So take your inside out leg. Okay, make sure that your curved seams are running in the same direction. You're going to feed it inside of the leg that's the right way round. Okay, and now just going to line up your inside leg seams. Okay, so that curved seam should lie on top of each other. The notches should match. Okay, so line them up, and I'm just going to put some pins in all around that curved seam to keep the edges together. There's the top of our inside leg seam. I'm going to match that up, put a pin in. And now the back seam, should have two notches at the back. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to sew around that again because it's a French seam. The first seam is going to be just a centimetre, 5 mil. Now this should be the right way around now. Okay. Okay, so go to the machine, and we're going to sew 5 mil from the edge. Using the edge of my foot as a guide. Okay, so when you go around this carved edge, just make sure you keep your seam straight. It doesn't mean the fabric to the left is going to be all wrinkled up, but just make sure you keep your seam straight. Okay. And we're working inside of this tube, it makes it a lot easier. Okay. There's your 5 mil seam all the way around. I'm just going to snip that inside leg point. So I've got my trousers on the table now, the right way around, and as you can see that seam is visible. So we're going to start by turning the trousers fully inside out. Okay, so this is to prepare for the second part of the French seam. So now you can see they're inside out. So I'm going to turn one leg the right way around again. This is just going to make it a lot easier to sew. Okay, now I'm going to put my hand up the other side of the trousers, and just use that hand to pull through that leg we've just turned around, and that's just going to bring your front and centre back seam together. rounded, smiley face shaped seam. Okay, turn it on its side. You can see now, can't you? The centre front and centre back seam. I'm going to take the iron, I'm going to press that out just to get it nice and flat. Just make sure the stitch line is right on the very edge. Just so that we know things are fitting nicely and lying straight. Okay, now I'm just putting a few pins in to hold it together. And the main thing to remember when doing this seam is it's actually wider than the first seam we did. So, for example, the first seam we did was 5mm wide. This seam's going to be 10mm or 1 centimetre wide, and that's going to fully encase the first seam and form your French seam. Okay. Now, if you notice, I've put these trousers make a tube. Okay. Now we've put the pins on the inside of the tube. When we take it to the machine, it's going to make it a lot easier to sew. Okay. So I'll take that to the machine now. So I'm back at the machine and I haven't pinned anything. I think I'm going to use my stitch guide to help me do a centimetre seam allowance all the way along. So that's that metal thing, it's a magnet. So all I'm going to do is run my fabric up against the edge of the stitch guide, and it gives you a nice even hem the whole way around. Okay, so when I'm getting to that, so I'm okay on my industrial machine, but you might find it difficult to go through all of these seams on your domestic. So if you just use your hand wheel to get you over that, any lumpy bits, it will save you a bit in the needle. Makes you go a little bit slower. Okay, so that's all the way around now. And that's the inside of my trousers, looking pretty neat. So here's the trousers on the table now. I'm going to pull the legs so that they're the right way around. And we're just going to check everything. Okay, so there's our pockets, looking straight inside. You can see our French seams on the inside seam. Okay, so the next thing to do now is to do our waistband. So I'm going to do my waistband now. So this waistband's going to have elastic and also a drawstring. So the first thing I want to do is to make some gaps in the waistband to pull the drawstring through. So I'm just chopping off about 10 centimetres off the end of the waistband. I'm going to mark it up with gaps or holes for the drawstring. Okay, so I just need a rule. I'm going to use a Sharpie just to show you how to do this. I'm going to dye this afterwards, so I'm not bothered about getting it, but the marker staining the fabric. Okay, so first of all, I've marked the centre and now a centimetre down and now another 2 centimetres down. Okay, so that 2 centimetre mark is going to be your gap for your drawstrings. Now I'm drawing in the stitch line. Okay, and where I'm putting those lines, that's the gap. Okay, that the drawstring's going to be pulled through. I'm going to transfer those markings onto the other side of the fabric. That's the easiest way to do it. And I just put my stitch line in again. I don't need to mark my centre seam here. Okay, and now I'm just going to attach that to either side of my waistband to make one complete waistband. And put a couple of pins in just to hold it into place. So when we put this on the trousers, this is going to be placed right at the front of the trousers. Okay, let's take that to the machine now. So I've got it on the machine now, and it's quite clear where you've got to sew. Okay, so I'm starting at the end, and then when I get to that T-bar, I'm going to do a really good back tack because that's going to be a stress point. Okay, so you need to back tack that and then come to the end. Perfect. Now if your fabric was very dark and you couldn't actually mark on it, you could always try just ironing a little bit of interfacing over this little square, and that makes it really easy to mark on with a biro or something, and also give a little bit of added stability as well. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just top stitch that seam down, and that's going to keep the sort of form the buttonhole and make it stable. Okay, and this side as well. It's quite easy to do. Just follow the seam line. Okay. Even both sides. Okay. So see that. Now if you don't do that, what would happen is when you pulled your drawstring through, the seam would probably pull through the hole as well. So you need to do this just to give your buttonholes or your drawstring holes stability. Okay, now I'm just going to do a little sort of square around it. You can do this, it's optional. It just gives a little bit more stability to your buttonholes, and it's totally up to you. You need to put a small stitch on if you're going to do this, because you're actually just sewing a few little stitches really across that bar. Okay, I'll give that a little trim now, and obviously this doesn't look the neatest because it's blue on white, but when the drawstring's through it, it's going to look fine. There's our little holes. Okay, wonderful. So the next thing we're going to do is attach the waistband to the actual top of the trousers. So I'm just, to start with, I'm just going to get the centre point of that little square we've just marked up. So just folded it in half, nipped it with the scissors, and I'm going to place that right sides to right sides to the centre seam of the trousers. I'm going to start pinning the front of the trousers first, the whole way through to the centre seam, just making sure those pockets are lying nice and flat. Okay, and the other side now. Okay, and I'm just going to flip that waistband over the trousers and start pinning the back. Now you might notice I've actually had to take this waistband in a little bit at the back to fit, but I think I used the actual wrong pattern for this one, so you should be okay with yours, don't worry. But if you need to do that, you can definitely do that. Take your waistband in to fit the trousers. Okay, I'm just going to put some pins all the way around. There we go. I'm going to take that to the machine and I'm going to sew that in place. But first of all, again, I'm going to turn my trousers inside out so those pins are on the inside of the tube that we've made with the trousers. Okay, make it easy to sew. Okay, so I'm starting at the back and I'm sewing on the actual waistband side, not the trousers. Okay, I've put some marks in there. I'm just making sure that the two pieces of fabric are edge to edge and following the pins, taking my pins out as I go. And there's the little holes that we made. Okay. Keeping the edges together and sewing about a centimetre away from the side. There we go, we're beginning again now. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do is form the waistband. So I'm going to put the fold in the waistband and I need to make it the right depth, and that is going to be the depth of the elastic. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a little piece of the elastic I'm using and I'm going to line it up against the seam that I've just sewn, and I'm going to put a pin at the top of it, and that will mark the width of the elastic on the waistband. Okay, all the way around. You need to have quite a few pins in actually. And the reason this is important is because the waistband needs to be the width of the elastic. When the elastic gets threaded through the waistband, if the waistband's too narrow, the elastic isn't going to lie flat. If it's too wide, it's not going to gather nicely. It's going to look a bit bulky, a bit puffy. So you need to spend a bit of time putting your pins in. So when you've done that, you need to take it to the ironing board, and we're going to iron a fold where that where those pins are. If we were doing a normal waistband that didn't have any elastic in, we'd obviously interface this to give it a bit of stiffness, but there's no need to do that. With this being elasticated, it's going to form stiffness of its own. Okay, so if you see what I'm doing there, I'm taking the pins off, folding where the pins are, and then the pins that I'm taking out, I'm just going to put them a little bit further down the waistband just to secure it in place. But just take the pin out, keep your fingers on where the fold's going to be, and there we go. So what I'm going to do is now is take my steam iron, and I'm going to press that fold in. Okay, and that's going to form the fold of my waistband. Done. So now I'm going to show you how you can secure the waistband, make this channel. So all I'm doing is folding the bottom of, I'm pressing that seam up, folding that, and I'm going to put a pin through that seam in the middle of the waistband, and making sure that when I put the pin in, it's catching in the bottom of the waistband. So this is your preparation for stitching the ditch. You might have heard of that before if you watch Sewing Bee. Okay, so with this process, the actual preparation of it is really important. Okay, so I'm putting my pin in the ditch or in that seam, and just making sure that it's catching that folded bit of the bottom of the waistband in, so that when we stitch it, that's going to hold this waistband down, and we shouldn't be able to see the stitching theoretically on the right side of the waistband. Because I'm going to be sewing it in blue, you definitely will see it, but if you use a contrasting cotton, you probably won't see it, and if you do, it'll only be very little, and by the time you've pulled your elastic in, you won't see it at all. Okay, so just keep doing that until it's all sewn, it's all pinned in place. Okay, you can put as many pins in as you want. Just keep your work tidy, keep trimming off your edges. So it's on the machine now. I'm going to start sewing. Okay, taking my pins as I go. So this is stitching in the ditch. The reason it's got so many scraggly bits in is because this is the third time I've done this video. I keep having to unpick it because I keep getting my hair in or running out of cotton. So if you see any straggly bits, yours shouldn't be like that. Anyway, so I'm just going around this waistband now, and I am trying my best to sew in that little seam line or the ditch. Okay, and I'm feeling with my fingers, I can feel, you turn it over and you can see I've caught that in there. And I know I've caught it in because as I'm sewing it, I can feel that little lip with my fingers, so I know that I'm catching it. Okay, because this is quite thin, this fabric. It's not like a heavyweight fabric, I can do that. So just keep going. Doing the best I can to keep it in the ditch, and now I'm getting to where I started, and I'm going to leave a little gap because I need a hole to thread my elastic through. Okay, there it is. I'm just going to check it's caught. This is the inside. It isn't fantastically neat, but it's all caught in, and you're not going to see this side. So as neat as possible, and as long as it's all caught in, that's fine. Okay, just going to trim off my straggly bits of thread. And there we go. So now I have got my elastic, and I've marked with a pen the right side of the elastic, or the same side of the elastic. This is just so I don't get it twisted. When we sew it together, when we've pulled it through, it's not twisted. So I'm just using a safety pin, and I am pushing that safety pin through and just grabbing it with my fingers and pulling the elastic as I go, okay? You can feel the safety pin through the layers of fabric, and just keep pushing and pulling. Okay, so the further along you get, the harder it is because you've got more elastic to pull through, but just keep persevering. Just will try your best to keep that elastic flat and not twisted in the channel. Okay, you're going to go right past your buttonholes. We're starting threading this at the back, so we need to bring it right through again to where that little hole was. I'll try and make sure not to pull that elastic through. Oh, there you go. Just if you feel it's going to get very close to the edge, just put a pin in it so it doesn't get pulled through. There you go, and just keep going. Okay, so there's a pin, I'm pulling it through. Now, this is where those little X's come in handy, because I've actually pinned my X's so that they're on opposing sides of the elastic. Okay, and that'll make sure. There you go. I'm going to sew it together with a little square, a little rectangle. This will keep it flat and keep it secure, because we're going to put 2 rows of stitching in. Just make sure your X's are on the same side. And then you can be sure your elastic won't be twisted, hopefully, and then pull it through. Tuck that in. And then just go and finish off your stitch in the ditch, that little bit that you missed. Okay, make sure to secure it all in. There we go. And trim your bits. And if you give it a tug, just to make sure that it's all nicely. So I've got my 2 trouser legs together. I'm going to mark my hems with the trousers together. Okay, so I've marked the finished length of this on one leg. And where I've got it pinned up, I'm going to take the pins out and I'm going to put them on the fold of the fabric, where the fold needs to be. And I'm going to just flatten those out. So I've got 2 legs together, and I'm going to do all the marking together on the legs. So first of all, I'm going to take a straight edge and tailor's chalk and put it where the fold should be on the trousers, on the hem. Okay, and put a little mark on that with the tailor's chalk. Now keeping pressure on the ruler or the straight edge, fold the first trouser leg over, and with the tailor's chalk, run it across, and that should actually mark both sides of the fabric, and then fold it up again and fold the other side. Okay, let's have a look at this, see how it's worked. Well, I can see those marks, but I'm not sure whether you can, so I might actually just do that again to show you. Okay, so put that straight line on the fold. Mark it with your tailor's chalk, fold that back, keep your pressure on that ruler or the whatever you use, and just to make sure the trousers don't move, and keep folding them back. And then you're going to mark actually 4 sides of your hem all together, and it's just going to make sure they're all even. Okay, you can see it that time, and that as well. Perfect. So now I'm going to just mark enough to give me a seam allowance. So in this case, 2 centimetres down from that fold. And I'm going to put a mark right through all of the right through the bottom of the trousers to cut the excess off. Okay, and I'm going to cut with a nice sharp pair of scissors if you have them. See, that's 2 centimetres. Okay. So now just get a nice sharp pair of scissors and you're going to cut that second line that you made. So you cut up the excess of all the pair of trousers all together. Okay, perfect. So now I've got my fold line marked. I'm just going to fold it back on that little mark that I've made and give it an iron. Okay, and then this one as well. So we know they're going to be the same because we've marked them together. Okay, now I'm just going to put a 2 centimetre roll hem on that. Okay, just fold it back once, and then when you fold it the second time, that fold should still be on the red line that we marked. So I'm doing this by eye, but if you like to, I'm just folding it once and folding it twice. It's not difficult. I think but at this stage you should sort of get to know what a centimetre looks like. Okay, so let's take that to the machine now when we've done the other leg. Okay, so I've got this on the machine. I've got the trousers the right way around so that we're sewing inside of the trousers, which makes it a lot easier. I'm starting at the centre seam, okay, and I'm just going to use my magnet here because I think it's important to have like a nice straight hem. And no matter how good your eye is, I will always use this, and I've sewn hundreds and hundreds of hems, and I still use a magnet. I trust this more than my eye to get a really straight hemline. Okay, so I'm trying to sew as close to the edge as possible. I just run my machine along that. And there we go, a nice straight edge. Here's the other one. This one I haven't pinned, I'm just folding it as I'm going. So pin it, just folding and making sure that I'm actually sewing on the red line. So just turning and sewing. So if you really like to do it this way, do it this way. Okay, there we go. It's straight. Oh, I run out of cotton. Just at the end, that is just typical. Never mind. So I'm going to make some drawstrings out of this nice silky satin that I've got, and I'm going to make bias strips to make these drawstrings. Now, to do a bias strip, you need to be able to cut at a 45-degree angle to the solid edge. So if you haven't got a set square, you can just use a piece of paper, and if you fold it along through that corner like that, you'll get a 45-degree angle, and you can use that as a guide. Okay, so I'm just putting a couple of little marks in. I'm going to use a ruler to join those together and make myself a nice long drawstring. Okay, I might do this in 2 parts actually and show you how you can join bias strips together. Okay, so I'm making these about 5 centimetres wide, just using my ruler. If you haven't got a ruler like this, just use a piece of wood or whatever straight edge you can. So the reason that we use bias strips when we're making like drawstrings or spaghetti straps is because when you cut fabric on the bias, it doesn't fray. Okay, you can try that theory out for yourself. So when you're actually working with narrow pieces of fabric and you're pulling it, it's really good that it doesn't fray. And also it's got a bit of stretch in it as well, which is always really good for drawstrings or for spaghetti straps or rouleau loops, whatever you use to make these when you're using these bias strips. Okay, so I'm just going to use the thickness of that now to cut another one. Just use that and laying it on the fabric and cut myself 2 of them. Okay, so basically this needs to be the length that when these are joined together, they need to be the width of your stomach plus another, whatever you want, maybe another 1/2 metre. So you've got dangly bits. Okay, so I'm going to join these 2 together, show you how you can do that on the machine now. So basically I'm making a cross, crossing them over, making a corner. And I'm going to sew from one edge of the corner to the other in the diagonal. Okay, now that will keep the stretch. Okay, so if you're actually making bias binding out of your strips, this is how you need to join the bias pieces together. So I'm just going to get my scissors and cut. They don't have to be pink and shears. I'm just using pink and shears. So you've got your stretch. So now I'm going to sew them over right sides together. Put a pin in. And I'm going to keep going. Keep my right sides together the whole way down. There we go, start at the top. And I'm just going to sew right on the edge of those 2 pieces of those 2 edges. Actually can use this magnet on this side as well. So that looks as if it's going to be about 1 centimetre wide. I'll put that away, about 1 centimetre away from the needle. It's going to keep these nice and even. Okay. So you can actually use this magnet both sides of the needle. Okay, just keep going. This is quite a long drawstring. It's better to make it long because you can always cut it to size. So I always tend to make I like a nice long drawstring, and then, so you don't want to tie a bow at the front of it, or, you might want to cut it down quite a lot. It's up to you. Okie dokie. So now what I'm going to do is I've got a blunt needle. And actually it's not a blunt needle, but it's a big needle with a big eye in, and I've actually doubled up my cotton there. Doubled up some quite strong cotton. You want your cotton to be strong because when you're pulling this through, it puts quite a bit of pressure on your cotton. And I'm just going to put a couple of stitches into the hem of the top of the piece of binding. And now I'm going to blunt side first. I'm going to thread the needle through the channel. Okay, so the needle's going in backwards. Be careful when you're doing this not to stab yourself with the needle. Now the thing about using satin is it's really easy to slide back on itself. If you were using a cotton or maybe linen again for this, you might have to make your channel a little bit wider because it doesn't slide. If you look at this now, the fabric is the satin is sliding very easily, and that's what's making it pull through easily. Okay, so satin's a good choice, or something silky like lining or a bit of nylon or whatever you've got that just slides easily against each other. Okay, so as you're pulling it through, keep hold of your needle or your cotton or whatever. Keep pushing it and make sure you don't get like a lot of, make sure you keep pulling it right from the end. There we go, the needle's nearly through now. So I'm just going to push this the whole way through, and then you'll see. Okay. So now I need to keep hold of the cotton as I'm pulling it through. This is why the cotton needs to be so strong. So you need to double up your cotton. Because if that breaks now, you know, it's really hard to sort of turn out. Okay, so I just concentrate on the very turning edge, that I don't get too congested there. So keep pulling the cotton and keep sliding it through. Yeah, that bit, make sure that doesn't get too knotted up. Okay. So you can see there all the handling that I'm doing. It actually is fraying a little bit. That's with a bias cut. Now if this was cut, if this bias band, if this strip was cut on the straight edge, it'd be really frayed by now. So that's why it's really important. You're handling it so much when you turn it inside out. It's really important it's cut on the bias because it's not fraying that much. Okay, so there you go, it's done. I'm going to cut off that edge and I'm going to thread that through the channel. I'm going to thread this through my waistband. I'm going to put it onto a pin, a safety pin. I'm going to put it in through one hole that we made. I'm going to just push it through. Okay, just keep pushing it. It's not hard. Yeah, it's through. Okay. I'm just going to tie the edges off with a little knot and trim them, and that looks fine. There you go. And that doesn't look bad, even though this is sewn with a contrasting fabric, it still actually looks quite nice. I think the drawstring has sort of brought that all together. Okay, so I'm going to show you an alternate way of doing that waistband now as well, before you go. Hang on one sec.